Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing very well on this Christmas season, and I hope you're having a fabulous time. So before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 3 of our story.
The Bigfoot is clever, Mummy, really clever. 'Cause it knew, Mum, we'd moved to this cottage. He seemed really pleased about it. He said the old lady had a message for our family, that I was to tell you that we are welcome to live in her cottage. She said apparently that she didn't like the other ones that stayed here. She's very particular, the Bigfoot told me. He said the old lady likes him to scare the ones she doesn't like away from the cottage. He said the old lady was very good friends with his father when his father was alive, so he said he had to look out for her on his father's behalf. He had promised his father that he would be faithful to keep his promises. Then after the Bigfoot told me this really funny story, Mum, he just turned around and glided away. He was carrying an octopus in his huge hands. I think he was going to eat it, Mum. His fingers were as big as sausages, and I'm not kidding. He was big, Mum. I think he might have been 9 foot tall. His shoulders were ginormous. He had deep-set, dark hooded eyes. They were kind. So I wasn't afraid of him at all. Some people say Bigfoots are horrible, Mum, but I don't agree, 'cause he was really nice to me and he wasn't scary at all. But if he was horrible towards me, he'd have been very scary, 'cause he's very, very big. I still can't believe the Bigfoot actually spoke to me, Mummy. I don't understand what he was talking about when he was talking about the old lady to me and said that she says we're welcome to live here. It's a bit weird, don't you think? I wonder what old lady he's talking about. I stood there, Mummy. I was watching him, said Howie excitedly. My mouth must have dropped open because it was just so shocking to see this Bigfoot. And when he walked away from me, it was like he was floating on air. He glided across the sea sand towards the trees, and that was when I saw another Bigfoot that was waiting there for him by a crooked oak tree. I very nearly didn't see her 'cause she blended so well into the background. He handed her the octopus he caught. I knew she was female 'cause she had boobies, little ones. She was smaller than him. He was much bigger. He towered over her. She looked pleased when he gave her the octopus. They both nodded at me, Mum. They were very, very friendly. Can you believe that? Now you know why I think this place is absolutely amazing. I saw 2 Bigfoots. That would never have ever happened in Chicago. Can you believe that? I used to go to bed at night, Mum, praying that I'd meet a Bigfoot. And it happened. God answered my prayers. I can't believe it.
Anna met her husband's eyes, and they clandestinely exchanged furtive looks. She knew what this was about. Her son was making up fictitious stories to get their undivided attention. She remembered how Howie had absolutely been delighted by the series on television. What was it called again? She struggled to remember the name, until a memory conveniently surged into her mind. Of course, the program was called Finding Bigfoot. She vividly recalled how Howie had sat transfixed in front of the television, with wide eyes focused on the television screen. He had been riveted about the program, so fascinated about the subject of Bigfoot.
Nan,
he would tirelessly say,
I want to see a Bigfoot.
I'm sure you'd like to see one, Anna had told him, but they may not be real, son. Even if they do exist, the chances of you meeting such an elusive creature are quite remote.
Not if you pray they aren't,
Howie had said insistently, as if his mother's sceptical words were like caustic acid being flung across his face. He hated the way his mother was so sceptically scathing about everything.
Mrs. Grimshaw at Sunday school says that if we have lots and lots of faith, we can move a mountain.
Well, as eloquent as Mrs. Grimshaw may be, Anna told her son,
I
I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who's moved a mountain before, have you? If it was so easy, it would have been done a long time ago, don't you think? Howie looked at his mother in exasperation, as if he thought she was terribly silly.
I don't think anybody would ever want to move a mountain, Mum. Mrs. Grimshaw was using that as an example of the power of faith, that's all. She wasn't meaning anyone would actually choose to move a mountain.
Anna was certain that Howie was frenziedly feeding his overactive imagination with warped, outlandish ideas that she wanted to actively discourage. His outlandish behaviour needed nipping in the bud before it got out of hand. She had never heard him talk like this before. Furthermore, incorrigibly, he had been so earnest, and she would normally have believed him when he spoke with so much passion. But a Bigfoot? I'm sorry. He never saw that creature for a moment. There was no possible way his story could be remotely credible. And what was all this nonsense about an old lady saying that the family were welcome to stay at Ocean Spray Cottage? She had never heard anything so ridiculous before in her entire life. They had moved into Ocean Spray Cottage as the new caretakers, having been hired by Mr. Claudio Fiorentino, or Fioretto, whatever his name was. This was the man who owned the estate. There was no old lady involved in the arrangements. What would people think if her son went around randomly telling people fictitious stories like this? They'd think that her son was as mad as a March hare, even though he was only 10. It was fanciful thinking on his part. And as for Bigfoot talking to him, Anna had never heard of anything so weird in her entire life. Had the heady sea air gone straight to Howie's head? After the long drawn-out journey, it would seem so. Maybe he was so fatigued, so absolutely exhausted, that he was seeing things that weren't actually there, and being unable to distinguish between his imagination and reality. Children could get the both very confused at times. Look, love, you and I well know you didn't see a Bigfoot. You know you're making all this up. I know you loved that program you used to watch on television all the time. Finding Bigfoot, about people who had had possible Bigfoot sightings. You fancied the idea of meeting a Bigfoot, didn't you? But I want you to know that what you saw on the beach may be what you wanted to see. It was dark out there. You probably saw a shadow of somebody walking across the beach and told yourself that you were observing a Bigfoot. My guess is you are very tired. It's understandable, love. We've been driving on the road for hours. It's very debilitating driving for a long time. It can knock the stuffing out of you, you know. Howie frowned. Tears of frustration crept up into his eyes, threatening to roll down his cheeks, but he stoically held them back. He didn't want his mother to see him crying.
You don't believe me, do you? Why would I make this up, Mum? I'm not a liar. I don't tell stories. I told you the Bigfoot spoke to me. Why won't you believe me? I saw one on the beach. Why would he talk to me about a strange old lady that I know nothing about? He had a squirming octopus in his hand. It was dangling in his fingers. Do you think I'd make this all up? I saw the female Bigfoot in the trees. He gave her the octopus. She was pleased about it. Maybe she was hungry and he went to get her a snack. She looked right at me, Mum. She had dark eyes and her eyes met mine. She was nice too. She nodded as if she was saying hello to me. She seemed really friendly. They both chatted together for a while. They spoke like you and me, but their language was kind of funny. And when they talk, they wave their arms around a lot to express themselves like you do when you're playing charades so people can guess what you're acting out. When they went away, I distinctly heard the distant trail of their chattering voices, and then they were gone. Dad came looking for me after that, and we came home. He was talking so much about the old lady he met on the beach that I never told him about the Bigfoot. You really expect me to believe all this nonsense, Howie? Said Anna, raising a brow. You and I know very well that this did not happen. It's not good to make up stories like this. Little Howie marched out of the living room indignantly, stamping his feet in frustration.
He slammed the door behind him so hard that Anna almost jumped out of her skin. Oh dear, that went well, she said, looking at her husband and rolling her eyes in the back of her head in frustration. What? She asked, when she noticed Douglas giving her a approving look. What? Why are you looking at me like that, love? There's no need to be so hard on little Howie, said her husband. He's only 10, Anna, for goodness sake. Give him a breather, won't you? We've had a long, exhausting 2-day trip on the road. We're all fatigued and frayed at the edges. If little Howie wants to believe he saw a Bigfoot on the beach, why on earth don't you humour him? Do you really have to ruin everything for our little boy by throwing cold water on his imagination? We should encourage our children to be visionaries, to enlarge their imaginations, not to stifle them. That's the problem with this coming generation, you know. They don't use their imaginations nearly enough. And I blame technology for that. It's overtaken their lives. We need to encourage the dreamers, the poets and the writers, to galvanize their creative energies, to make this a better world for the all of us. There could be a writer in our son, and you being hell-bent on crushing his imagination like this is a bad idea, if you ask me. Anna sighed. Well, you do make a good point when you put it like that. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been hard on Howie. 1 week later. It was almost impossible to believe that an entire week had gone by at Ocean Spray Cottage, and in that short space of time so much had happened. Anna had been efficiently productive in making Ocean Spray into a cosy den for the family. It was almost as if they'd lived here for a very long time. The family settled into Ocean Spray Cottage seamlessly. Anna had hired a local painter to give the cottage a much-needed makeover, which included a crisp white coat of paint on the outside exterior walls. She had chosen lilac paint for the shutters, the outer frames of the windows, and the front door, and it really did look rather fetching. Anna couldn't help but wonder why on earth she had chosen a colour like lilac for the shutters. It had never been her favourite colour. But when she looked at the paint charts when selecting colours to choose from, she was drawn to picking lilac for reasons she could not comprehend. And even her rather cautious husband had to admit that the lilac influences on the cottage gave the place an ethereal look, like a delicate piece of Wedgwood china. The spongy green moss had been removed from the roof. Anna had thrown out the dead geraniums from the hanging basket and replaced them with a tumble of lilac geraniums, a mix of purple pansies and lobelia. The irony is she would never have chosen lilac geraniums like this, but they complemented the shutters and the outer look of the property, and it all worked. She had planted a mixed collection of flowers in container pots, all once again lilac and purple influences, which she placed in the front of the cottage. It really looked as if the cottage had undergone a miraculous makeover and had been dragged away from its former sense of neglect that had embodied the place when they had first arrived. Anna had industriously, with a dogged, zealous determination, scrubbed and cleaned Ocean Spray Cottage from top to bottom, so that it shone like a brand-new pin, with sparkling windows and polished furniture. She had bought some odds and ends and little knick-knacks from a place called Home Decor to give the cottage that in-home feeling, and once again she had incorporated soft lilac influences in the items that she had purchased, like a fluffy lilac throw and some lilac and grey cushions for the chairs. Their little nest had become sumptuously cosy and very welcoming. The views from the living room windows that overlooked the frolicking ocean on a warm, sunny day became almost an aquamarine colour. It was so prepossessing. Anna had always dreamed of living in a property only a stone's throw away from the beach, and at long last her dreams had been realised. Howie had been enrolled at a new school. He was settling down very well, claiming he'd made a new friend called Simon, who, unlike his mother, believed in his Bigfoot encounter on the beach.
Mum, Simon's uncle once saw big footprints on the beach, and he knows they came from a Bigfoot. He took pictures of them.
I wish, love, you wouldn't tell people what you claim to have seen on that beach, Anna reprimanded her son, unable to hide the annoyance in her voice. Some people, Howie, might think you're making it all up. You don't want people to think you're telling lies, do you?
Simon didn't make any of this up,
said Howie, thundering off in a huff. He really was quite outraged that Anna refused to believe his story, and was now doubting his new friend's claims. His mother was always so cynical about everything. Anna was particularly happy about her husband Douglas, who was like a new man, driven by purpose, excited to put his positive influences over the gardens on the property, and he had already drawn up some interesting designs that included container walls made from stone, ponds with waterfalls, hedgerows to frame flower beds, quaint stone paths, water features, and potted plant displays. These days he was whistling away happily to himself, paying her compliments all the time. "I'm really enjoying my job here," he told her. "It's so good to feel useful again. I've got so many lovely ideas to orchestrate here for these gardens, and when I've finished with them, my boss is going to be eating out of my hands. He'll be so impressed. I have to tell you, love, Ocean Spray Manor House is exquisite. Wait until you see it. I'll take you there tomorrow. The views from those windows are absolutely spectacular. It's my job to organise a cleaning team to spruce up the place twice a week, under Mr. Fiorentino's strict instructions. It's in great nick. I understand Ocean Spray House has been in Mr. Claudio Fiorentino's wife's family line for 4 generations. And by the way, the name is definitely Fiorentino. It's not Fioretta. She doesn't want to sell this place under any circumstances. She has nostalgic, wistful memories of her childhood spent here on the beach and at the manor house. She wants to preserve the property, so that even her great-grandchildren can enjoy the benefits when they come here for their holidays." It must have been early on a Tuesday morning that Anna saw a polished black Bentley rolling down her driveway. She was intrigued. She had a visitor, and one clearly who was not short of a bob or two. She had been told by her husband, who regularly took a walk down the beach in the late afternoon, that the old lady Verity Onassa that he'd met with his son on the first day here would soon be paying her a social visit. Could this be her now, Anna wondered. Even though she'd been busy in the cottage, she knew that enjoying some adult conversation for a change, with someone who wasn't her husband, would be gladly welcome. Anna remained at the kitchen window. She stared out curiously at the black Bentley, waiting to see the mysterious visitor as she got out of her car. She wanted to see who was paying her a visit. The door of the car swung open, and a woman with a mop of white hair in a layered, short-cropped hairstyle, wearing white pants and a silky purple blouse, climbed out of the Bentley, holding a white Maltese poodle in her arms. Anna had no idea how old the woman was. She could be in her early 70s or early 80s, but she was in robust health. She walked with a straight back and an easy grace. Anna almost jumped out of her skin when a knock sounded at the door. "Hello, dear," said the woman standing in the doorway, wearing a warm, friendly smile on her face. Close up, her skin was heavily lined, but Anna thought her very beautiful, like a woman who'd lived an interesting life, and every single one of those lines told a story. "I'm Verity Onassis. I met your husband and son on the beach on the very first day. I told him I'd be paying you a visit, so I hope you've been expecting me." "But of course," said Anna, remembering her manners, and gesturing for the woman to enter the house. "This here is little Bella. I usually take her with me wherever I go. She's a Maltese poodle mix. Some people have purses. I have Bella," she teased. "I promise you she's house-trained. She won't be an imposition to you. She shan't be lifting her leg on the furniture." "You are both so welcome. Please come in," said Anna, gesturing for the woman to take a seat in the living room, with its prepossessing views overlooking the ocean. "I love dogs myself. Bella is a beauty, I can see that at first glance. My son would wish to be here. He adores dogs. He's got a thing about them. Ah, yes, I never had Bella with me when I met your son and husband on the beach the first afternoon they were here. I had dropped her off at my friend's. She's a mobile groomer. She gives Bella the works. Oh, my word, it is so cosy in here, said Verity, glancing around the living room appreciatively. I notice you've painted your shutters lilac and the front door as well. They were like that for many years, you know, when I was a girl. My late aunt was passionate about the colour lilac. It was her quintessential favourite colour. She incorporated lilac in all her decor and in the exteriors of this house. If she was here today, she'd be as pleased as Punch to see the choice of colour you've chosen. Well, I'm trying to make it look homely, Anna admitted. It's a work in progress. In truth, I have no comprehension of why I painted the shutters lilac, but I guess I was divinely inspired or something. What can I get you to drink, Mrs. Onassis? The old woman waved her hand in horror, as if she absolutely hated being called by her last name. Oh, please call me Verity, will you, love? I tell you what, have you got something cold by any chance? I couldn't possibly stomach anything hot in the weather like this. It's been unpalatably muggy and close, hasn't it? Do you know, when you get to my age, Anna, extremes of temperature can be such a botheration. Well, how about some ice-cold homemade lemonade, served with a plethora of ice? Asked Anna. Would that tickle your fancy, perhaps? Homemade, said Verity, raising an appreciative brow. Now that sounds idyllic. Now you're talking. I knew coming here this morning was a jolly good idea. It seems I was right, she teased. Moments later, Anna returned to the living room. She carried in her hands a tray of tall glasses that tinkled with the ice, topped up with delicious homemade lemonade, along with a plate of oatmeal and raisin cookies, and a bowl of water for little Bella. She placed the tray on the coffee table and handed the tall glass of lemonade to Verity Onassis, who took the glass gratefully from her hands. Oh, that looks lovely, dear. Just what the doctor ordered, said Verity, taking an appreciative sip. Oh, my word, that tastes so refreshing. Did you make it yourself, dear? That I did, said Anna proudly. This batch took 26 fresh lemons to make. I'm glad you like it. In truth, I'm very pleased you've come here today, Verity. It is nice to have adult female company for a change. I don't know many people in these parts, so I've been a tad lonely. Bless you, love. What a very kind thing for you to say. I understand from your husband that you're from Chicago. That's a long way from home. What brought you out here so far away from friends and family? I think we just wanted a change of scene, Anna lied. You know how it is. Not really, love. I'm one of these people who's very, very set in my ways, you see. I live in the very same house overlooking the beach where I was raised as a little girl. My father left me the house in his will. I was still living with him when he died there, so I never actually moved out. I'm the sort of person that gets very attached to things, you could say. I guess if I were a ghost, I'd come back to haunt the place, she chuckled. You know, they say that when you die, you need to release all your attachments from this earth to have a good death, like your finances, your family, your home, your possessions, and your animals. But me, I could never release my attachments to this place. So I guess I'm stuck with the fact that I'll be haunting this beach in the hereafter, she joked. I couldn't bear to live anywhere else in the world, if the truth be told. This stretch of fabulous coastline is so dear to my heart, as it was to my late aunt. I did a lot of travelling, you know, Anna, when I was a young adult. You could say I almost circumnavigated the entire globe, and I'm not exaggerating. Visited so many interesting places, historic landmarks. Saw lots of lovely sights, I did. The Great Wall of China, the pyramids in Egypt, The Taj Mahal. I've seen it all, done everything, met so many marvellous people. But you know, Anna, I was always so glad to get back home. I soon began to ask myself, what was the point of doing all this travelling, when there was only one place I really wanted to be, and that was here at home. The travel bug left me. I no longer desire to go far away. It's not because I'm getting old now and I've lost my sense of adventure, as you might think. When push comes to shove, there really is no place like home, and this stretch of coastline is my piece of heaven, and sometimes the very best adventures occur at your own front doorstep. That certainly has been my experience in this life. You've put that very eloquently, Verity. I completely get it. I do think there is a danger I might also get attached to this stretch of coastline if I'm not careful. It's so idyllic. I get why people love it here, why they never want to leave this part of the world. Well then, dear, maybe we'll both be haunting this stretch of coastline one day in the future, she chuckled. I can't imagine wanting to leave this place, even in death. Verity paused for a moment and sipped her lemonade. How is your husband enjoying his new job as caretaker at Ocean Spray? She asked, her tone of voice sounding a little concerned. Oh, you mean my husband? As it happens, he's really loving the job. He was saying to me, I cannot believe I've been paid for doing something I love. So yes, he's incredibly happy here. We've come through a tumultuous time, you know. My husband been out of work, well, he has been for an entire year. He was badly injured on a construction site. It was a miracle he survived his injuries. I'll spare you the details of what actually happened to him. I don't want to be reminded of all those ugly things, but let's just say he's glad to be back on his feet again. Goodness gracious me! You do surprise me, said Verity, massaging Bella's white curly coat between her fingers. She looked directly at Anna with sympathetic eyes. I can't imagine what you've been through, love, what you've all been through. How dreadful for your poor husband. He never told me he'd been through such a tough, tortuous time. Our health is so dreadfully important to us. When it fails, it sucks the joy out of our lives like nothing else I know. I once slipped a disc in my back, you know. I couldn't leave my house for a year, so I know all about that. Your poor husband. You'd never guess, would you? He looks nimble on his feet. That was my impression when I met him on the beach that evening, or that late afternoon, if you like. Goodness gracious me, when he told me he was going to be the caretaker of Ocean Spray Estate, I thought to myself that Mr. Fiorentino had found a very strong man. Anna nodded in agreement. No, you wouldn't, would you? He certainly made a very quick recovery. Oh, talking about my husband, Verity. He told me that there hasn't been a caretaker living on the grounds of the estate for a year and a half, which might explain why Ocean Spray Cottage was so neglected when we moved in. He was telling me that you were saying, Verity, that there's been a lot of caretakers here over the years, that suddenly just upped and left this place. That got me rather intrigued, I have to say. I thought I needed to talk to you about it. I have to admit it was a little troubling to hear that, but I was hoping that you might be able to throw some light over this mystery. It's been all very unfortunate, agreed Verity. I know Mr. Fiorentina hired a local man to manage the affairs of the estate, who lived very close to town, but he gave in his notice a week ago. He's moving to Utah, I believe, to be close to his wife's family. It's the reason why Mr. Fiorentina was eager to replace him with a new live-in caretaker. In recent years, most people who move here don't last very long at Ocean Spray Cottage. One couple did happen to live here for a couple of years, very happily. But the last caretaker and his wife left Ocean Spray Cottage in the middle of the night, just like that. They gave in their notice the very next day to Mr. Fiorentino. I hasten to say they were incredibly rude to the poor man. They said to him they wouldn't be seen dead staying in Ocean Spray Cottage again, and he could stuff his job and put it up his backside. Mr. Fiorentino asked them why they were so grievously upset, and they told him that he knew exactly why they were pissed, and that he needed to rot in hell. I never did like that couple, I have to say. The last caretaker was very shifty, you know, very furtive eyes, I thought. He looked as if he was up to all kinds of nonsense. So when I heard he was gone, I have to say I was heartily relieved about that. I did come to visit them when they moved in, you know. They practically threw me out of Ocean Spray Cottage. The caretaker's wife told me she didn't appreciate visits from strangers without advance notice. And did I mind awfully if I bogged off? Those were the exact words she used on me. I was quite affronted. I couldn't believe Mr. Fiorentino, who is a very meticulous man, about everything he does, would hire two such disagreeable people. We are friendly folk around here in these parts, so that woman's abrupt manner was most uncouth. Anna whistled. She sounds absolutely awful. That is blatantly rude. It's unfortunate, though, that so many caretakers left. Do you think they didn't like working for Claudia Fiorentino? My husband reckons he might be quite the taskmaster. I mean, he practically insisted we left Chicago right away that very night, when my husband received the job. Well, that doesn't surprise me, laughed Verity. Have you ever met Mr. Fiorentino? Let's just say he's very particular. No, I haven't, said Anna. My husband got his job online. He never met the man. Verity raised an arched brow. They do rarely do things differently nowadays, don't they? All this computer technology, it's beyond me. I could never get into it myself. I prefer to do things the old-fashioned way. I have a cell phone, you know, but I barely use it at all, apart from making essential calls to my family and friends. I won't have my life dictated to by a silly little gadget. Mr. Fiorentino may be many things, but underneath it all he's a very good man, you know. I've met him myself, and yes, I will say he has exacting standards, and is demanding, but I can assure you he's a decent man. He pays generously. He's always very fair to his staff. So then if it's not Mr. Fiorentino driving these caretakers away from Ocean Spray Cottage, what is it then that makes them abandon this place? You really want to know the answer to your question? Asked Verity. I'm not sure you're going to believe me, but I'll tell you anyway. I was talking about attachments earlier on, love, and how if I was deceased I'd probably come back to haunt the stretch of coastline myself, as I love it so much. And I didn't actually say that in jest, you know. I meant every word of it. So I have a theory about what I believe is going on here at Ocean Spray Cottage. I'm pretty sure I'm right, and it's got a lot to do with attachment. Go on, said Anna. You've got me intrigued. Well, I happen to know a lot about the subject of attachments. When I was a little girl of about 7 or 8 years old, my father regularly took me to a little antique shop in town. A lovely little shop it was. It was called the Old Soul. You don't get shops like that any more these days. More's the pity, if you ask me. Now, my father was a passionate collector of antiques. He loved all things old, with a historic significance attached to it. The antique dealer was a very good friend of my father's. This was a long time ago in 1943. I remember his name was Mr. Stanley Rockenster. The man wore an old-fashioned top hat and tails every day of the week, as if he was stuck in an 1800s time warp. He was such a debonair, rather dashing gentleman, you know. He wore a distinctive pocket watch in his top pocket. I always remember he had these little round spectacles, and a distinguished little moustache that curled neatly at the ends. It's funny the things you remember, isn't it? Anyway, he gestured to my father to come and see this new rocking chair that had come into the shop. He knew my father had been looking to acquire a rocking chair, and this one was spectacularly unique, handcrafted in walnut. It was a head-turner. "I think I've got the perfect chair you're looking for, sir," he told my father. My father took one look at that rocking chair and said, "It's a magnificent piece. I'll take it." Well, we brought the rocking chair into our home, placed it in our living room, in a very special place, and on several occasions when we were entertaining our guests, many of our visitors were eager to sit in that chair, but when they did, they were physically thrown off it. My parents observed the whole thing. These guests of my parents would claim that someone had physically thrown them off the chair. They had felt a hand on their backs, pushing them off the seat. It really startled them. My mother sat on that rocking chair herself, and the very same thing happened to her. So she was spooked by the whole thing. She wanted that rocking chair out of our house. She put it on the street corner to dispose of it, in the hope that someone would pick it up and just take it away. But when she returned to the living room, the rocking chair had been replaced in its original position. She was so freaked out by that event, because she knew she had put that chair on the street corner. So how had it miraculously reappeared into the house like that? She left that rocking chair well alone, deciding she wanted nothing more to do with it. My father was naturally perturbed by what was happening with the rocking chair, as when he sat on it himself, nothing bad ever happened to him. He loved that rocking chair, but he couldn't fathom why certain people were always thrown off it. The next time me and my father visited the old antique shop, he told Mr. Rockenster about the enigmatic, rather cryptic events concerning the rocking chair. How my mother had been unable to dispose of it. It had miraculously reappeared in our living room. The first thing Mr. Rockenster said to my father is, "Ah, you've got an attachment, sir. It happens a lot with antiques, you know. This is nothing new. I've experienced it quite a lot in my profession, especially with things from the World War." My father was rather perplexed. He said to Mr. Rockenster, "But I don't understand. What is an attachment?" Mr. Rockenster told him the rocking chair had come from a deceased estate. It had belonged to a man called George Farrington, who would sit on his front porch every afternoon and evening, watching the world go by. But George Farrington was a very particular, dogmatic man, with strong likes and dislikes. He was very opinionated about things, definitely a misogynist. He had no time for women at all. He was quite haughty and prideful, with a little bit of superiority, rather snobbish, you could say. He didn't like people who weren't as refined and polished as he was. Mr. Rockenster told my father that he believed Mr. George Farrington was still attached to that chair, even after death, and that was why he threw anyone off it that he disliked or felt wasn't good enough for the chair. For some reason, my father was a very polished, well-to-do gentleman. So I expect Mr. George Farrington was happy for him to use his rocking chair. Believe it or not, the rocking chair is still in my home to this very day, and sometimes I observe it rocking on its own accord, for no rhyme or reason. but I've got used to it, you know. I'll never let anyone sit on that chair, unless they're incredibly posh, because otherwise George Farrington will throw them off the chair in a heartbeat. I promise you, nothing has changed in that regard. Believe it or not, when I was 8 years old, I would come and stay with Aunt Victoria rather regularly. My parents had itchy feet. They just seemed to want to travel so much. So I was left in her charge a great deal. And I think she enjoyed my company. She'd put me to sleep in the upstairs bedroom at night, read me a story. One night I stood up on my bed to look outside the window. I'd heard an owl hooting, and I loved owls. This owl was so close that I almost believed it was sitting on my mantel hooting. That's how close it sounded. So I pulled open the window and stood up on my bed to peer out, hoping I'd maybe spot this owl somewhere. There was a tree very close to the window, so I was looking out on the branches there to see if I could see anything. It was a moonlit night, and so the visibility was excellent. My aunt was out there in the front yard, having a conversation with a huge hairy man. I remember thinking he was like a giant. He was so very big. I'd never seen anyone like him before. He had these enormous shoulders, overlong arms, and an arched head. The hairy man gave her a couple of very large fish, and then she gave him something in return. I suspected it probably was some of her cookies. She was very good at cooking, you know. But anyway, my aunt was very friendly with this idiosyncratic hairy man. Whenever I went to stay with her, the hairy man visited my aunt regularly. I began to call him the Bear Man. He was so hairy and so large, it seemed like the most appropriate name. I was at that kind of age that if I saw Father Christmas climbing down the chimney, or Hermit the Frog visiting my home, it would be very normal for me. Kids are so accepting of the unusual, are they not? I asked my aunt who the Bear Man was, and she told me he was a very good friend of hers, but was very, very shy and bashful, and I mustn't tell anybody about him, as he was a secret, and I never did, you know. It was only when I was older, and long after my Aunt Victoria had died, that I realized the Bear Man was in fact a very large male Bigfoot.
A Bigfoot? Are you joking?
No, I'm not joking, Anna dear. Goodness gracious me, look at your face. You look so confounded. I happen to know there are 2 Bigfoots in these parts, a male and a female. How do I know this? Because I've seen them very often in the early evenings taking a stroll down this stretch of beach over here. They show themselves to me. They're terribly friendly, always nodding, very politely at me. I think they know I'm related to my late Aunt Victoria Seymour. That's why they show themselves to me. The one thing my great-aunt always used to tell me when I was a little girl, that the Bear Man was a very loyal friend, that you couldn't get anyone as loyal as him. She would say that normal human beings have issues and agendas, but with the Bear Man what you see is what you get.
Oh, my word, said Anna.
I gave my son such a chastising the other day. He claimed he'd seen a Bigfoot on the beach, and that the Bigfoot talked to him. And I just didn't believe a word of it. I thought he was making up fictitious stories. It seems I've got some apologizing to do. How very interesting, Anna dear. I can assure you, the very fact that your son encountered a Bigfoot on the beach was not a random accident by any stretch of the imagination. In my experience, these elusive cryptid creatures don't just show themselves to anyone. What did they say to your son? Or was it one Bigfoot that spoke to him? I'm amazed they engaged in conversation with him. Your son must be very special." "Dear me, what did they say? Let me think. Oh, my son told me they had a message from some old lady who said that we were welcome to stay at Ocean Spray Cottage. He said that the old lady was very particular and had got him to scare away anyone he didn't like from the cottage. But she told us we were welcome to stay here. I thought my son was making this all up, I hasten to say." Verity clapped her hands enthusiastically. "Oh, my word, that is such good news. Don't you see, that proves my theory about attachment is startlingly correct. It's a very similar story to the rocking chair in my home. When Victoria Seymour died, she was incredibly attached to Ocean Spray Cottage and, of course, the coastline in these parts. I think the Bigfoot she befriended and his progeny have been very loyal to Aunt Victoria even in death. They've been keeping a careful, vigilant eye on the cottage for her. They have a very obvious connection to the other side, you know, Anna. They're clairvoyant and can see and hear spirit. They're also telepathic. My aunt told me this. I think if the spirit of Victoria Seymour doesn't like the people that have moved into Ocean Spray Cottage, which she still obviously considers to be her own, even in death, she gets those Bigfoots to scare away the people from the property. One family stayed here for 2 years. They were very happy. She obviously liked them. They were called the Olivers. But they couldn't stay here indefinitely, as Mr. Oliver was given a really incredible job in Connecticut that he just couldn't turn down. I think they lived in the cottage very peacefully. My Aunt Victoria liked them, I suspect. But when they left, all hell broke loose, as the new caretakers would leave in a panic. Something scared them away. It was those 2 mischievous Bigfoots. Believe me, I know." "So what does this mean exactly, Verity?" "Well, it sounds like you and your family have got absolutely nothing to worry about, which is very good news as far as I'm concerned. My guess is the Bigfoot spoke to your son to tell you and your family not to worry, because you were welcome to stay in the cottage. He was conveying a message from beyond the grave, from my Aunt Victoria. I know it sounds rather fanciful, very woo-woo and far-fetched, but I believe that is what is going on here, and it's excellent news as far as you're concerned. It means your family will not be bothered by those Bigfoots, who in their loyalty to my great-aunt Victoria have been turfing out people from this place when she doesn't want them staying here. I imagine they must be jolly good at doing it. I mean, let's not kid. Who wouldn't be terrified and scared of an intimidating Bigfoot that appears to be threatening you? No wonder all those people left in an awful hurry." "So what actually did happen to these caretakers living here at Ocean Spray Cottage? So how exactly did the Bigfoot scare away the caretakers from Ocean Spray Cottage, Verity? Do you happen to know the answer to that question?" "Well, I do, in a manner of speaking. I spoke to Mr. Fiorentino himself. He told me that many of the caretakers staying at Ocean Spray Cottage reported the feeling of being very unwelcome there, as if something didn't want them living in the cottage. And then 1 or 2 of them reported seeing an old woman in their dreams, telling them to get the hell out of her place. I personally believe that was my Aunt Victoria Seymour, reaching them through their dreams. It was at night that these caretakers would report very strange, enigmatic banging on the walls of the cottage. They also saw ambiguous, shadowy faces staring at them through the windows with yellow eyes, and I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been. Mr. Fiorentino didn't believe a word of it, of course. But I suspect if you were staying in the cottage at night and you saw Bigfoot circumnavigating your property, banging on the walls with the sole purpose of intimidating you and scaring you half to death, they would more than likely achieve their goals." Anna had to admit, feeling heartily relieved, that the Bigfoot that had encountered her son by the rock pool on the beach had assured him that their family was welcome to stay at Ocean Spray Cottage. She knew she had some apologizing to do to her son, because she had disbelieved everything he'd told her. She had some making up to do. "Well, I better be going," said Verity Onassis, rising to her feet. "I've really enjoyed our little chat, Anna. It's been so good to meet you, my dear. And by the sounds of things, you and your family are going to be around for a very long time, now that you've won Victoria Seymour's seal of approval. And with those lilac shutters, my guess is you've pleased her greatly. My aunt always had impeccable taste when it comes to people. I knew the moment I laid eyes on your husband on the beach that I liked him. And now that I've met you, I like you too, Anna. And I'm very sure we're going to become great friends." "I would like that very much," said Anna. So there we are. That's the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.